The title of this session and my book that will be coming out January of 2025 is Unpack Your Bags and Let's Go. And it's really about overcoming self defeating behaviors. What are the drivers and what happened and how did we interpret what has happened to us? Because in our behavior, it always comes from a place. And the root cause of repeated human behaviors is a combination of several factors. And I want to kind of walk through those factors. And sometimes they form a resentment. And when it forms a resentment, then when things go wrong, most of the time we go wrong with them. When things go crazy, well, we go crazy. If it goes mad, then we go mad. This happens and we respond. This happens and we respond. So I want to talk about some of those causes. And the first one I want to talk about are habits and conditioning. Repeated behavior repeatedly is driven by habits that form the habits that are formed through the actions repeated over and over and over and over again. And neutral pathways in the brain become really efficient, making the behavior automatic. So we don't understand consciously and intentionally why we do what we do. We just respond. And it's part of conditioning. It's a reflex. It's a mental and emotional and even a spiritual reflex. It's classical and it's operant as well. And these things are the drivers for behavior. Whether it's a reward or a punishment that shapes the future behavior. If it's a reward, we strive to get that a reward again. If it's punishment and we seek that as the answer to feel different, then we will repeat that behavior to go to a place to stop feeling or to feel different. It also can be biological factors. Human behavior can be influenced by biological predispositions, like genetic traits as well, brain chemistry, hormonal activities, and even when a woman has postpartum depression and goes in that space, it can make a shift in the behavior. Okay. And it's like a dopamine release can also reinforce behavior that even brings pleasure. And if it brings pleasure, there's most likely mm, to be repeated. That's one thing about drug use and alcohol use, or even people that are getting pleasure because they find acceptance and they find honor and they find someone notices them or they find love and they repeat that behavior. They're seeking the same thing. And it's kind of interesting with the body because we try to seek that high, no matter how you want to define that high and what space you want to put it in. We seek that same high, and most of the time we can never ever get it again. It can be cognitive patterns, like your thoughts and your beliefs. They can perpetuate behavior. If you believe a certain action will give you a certain outcome, then you repeat that action. It's like a confirmation bias and the desire for consistency that helps us to maintain those behaviors. So those patterns, the thoughts and the things that we buy into, and that's our beliefs, we tend to create habits around that. And then we respond a certain way, whether it be going to church every single Sunday or whether it be going to the bar every single Saturday night. It can be environmental causes. Now, that's really important because people, places, and things, and even the time of day can cue that. I've known a lot of people that went into addiction, and when they got their hands on money, there was this overwhelming a surge of dopamine into the brain, and they just have to go do it. They have to respond. So when they get a lot of money, then they have to respond and go into because that money is attached to the feeling that they get that is attached to their beliefs about that money. It really is a trigger for behavior. That's why when a person goes into AA or CA or CNA, Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, when they go into those programs, they kind of help people guard against getting too high and getting too low. In other words, if you make a lot of money, you're excited, you may go celebrate. If you lose all your money, then you're depressed and you're going to go celebrate. But even you can go into certain places and hear certain songs, and it will trigger back an emotion that gives a response, whether it's a tangible reward or it could be, but it would bring in repetition, or it could be a demise. And we say we're never going to do it again, and then we do it again. It's like your brain has been hijacked. The emotional states as well. Emotional states is extremely important because it helps you to relieve stress. Okay, helps us manage negative emotions. That's why a lot of people check out and just do nothing or lay in the dark or find other ways that they can reduce that stress, like watch certain things on television or play video games, even. It could be unresolved psychological needs. If you feel like there's a perception of a lack of love, or actually lack of love, or a lack of connection, or even validation, a lack of control or achievement. When human beings have a perceived lack of love, control, or significance, that's when we spin. It could be social and it could be cultural as well. Now, as we have these triggers that really define how we respond, when we become conscious of these things, then we can take the steps to either reinforcing the things that are working and moving away from the things that are not working. But first of all, it comes with a recognition and acceptance. Perhaps acceptance that your life is unmanageable, acceptance that you're not breaking through the barrier that you really have a desire to break through. And if you can't break through, then there's an emotion attached to that, and there's a response within that emotion. The thinker thinks and the prover always proves. And what does the prover prove? Well, whatever the thinker thinks. Those are some of the things that drive it. Later, we'll talk about human behavior and those triggers and how that shows up in our life with that human behavior. Now, with that in life, when things happen, we tend to form some type of resentment, and that resentment can be towards yourself. It can be towards your parent, someone that you love. You can feel as though your children have held you back, and you still love these individuals, but somehow there's a deep seated resentment that your life would be different without this, or they didn't do this, your life would be different, or somebody took something from you, or there's a perceived absence of that control, where you had no choice, or you feel like you are all there by yourself, and it doesn't matter what the real circumstances are. So, as you make your list of the people that you may have a resentment towards, and it doesn't have to be some deep seated hatred, resentment. It's just that those emotions that pop up. Maybe if you were single, from time to time, I can go be out what I want, or I wouldn't have to do this. Or if I was single, perhaps I'd be a little happier. And then you vacillate back to, no, I'm really glad and happy where I'm at. Or it can be like I had a patient one time that actually she felt like she was all alone. And I mentioned this before, and that nobody was ever there for her. Her mother and dad weren't there. And when we went into the story, we found out her father died when she was a little kid, very, very young, a toddler, and her mother had to work two and a half jobs to maintain the household, to support her. So as a mother's doing the right thing, the only thing she could think of, it's always about me when it comes to human behavior. There's a need to be fulfilled, a need to have connection when we want it or need it until we can go internally and start to manage, to understand, and to control the things that are controllable. And the things that are controllable are how we respond to everything. However, based upon environment, based upon your chemical makeup or genetics, based upon your preposition to whether it be postpartum depression or a breakup in a relationship or a loss of a job, which is attached to your feeling of not being worthy, and all these things are always anchored in fear. If you lose your job, then maybe you're not worthy, and maybe you can lose your family, or you can lose your home or your car, and it's tied to maybe perhaps I'm not good enough where I'm moving into I feel like I'm a failure. No, I don't feel like I'm a failure. I am a failure. And the thinker thinks and the prover proves. The thought comes and then the emotions drive. So it could be so many different things. Like so many often I talk about people who say their heart is broke. And I ask people all the time, have you ever had your heart broken and how did it feel? Oh my goodness. A loss of energy. You're very lethargic. You don't know if you want to get up sometimes. There's certain people that just they break down and cry. But if your heart was broken, you'd really be dead. You're in a story that was created and was nurtured through your circumstances or through the anchors and triggers you have in your life. But it is your story, and you can rewrite the story and rewrite the story to have a different outcome. And you can create new anchors and triggers, new behaviors, new habits, new rituals that can drive you out of it that can drive you out of it. One way is to change the way you use your body. You use your body, you sit erect, head up, straight, then it's hard for you to go into a depressed state. If you look at the ceiling and smile with all teeth, it's almost impossible to go there. If you get up and start running, that's a good stressor, that stress reliever that can reduce stress in the body. And it really starts in the body. There's a brain in the body. We have trillions of cells, and they're all thinking, they're all in communication, they're all doing a job 24/7, man, to keep us here and keep us functional. And they talk. And even when we have parasites in the body, they talk because everything that lives communicates, even a tree. They all communicate in their own way. So when you open up your levels of understanding to what's happening, even when you have this rush of dopamine where you have a lust or an attraction, and if you understand what is happening, then you can look at your life and your history, you know that this too shall pass. So you can make wiser decisions and not operate and respond to the retraction, to the attraction, you see, or respond to I have to go out and drink, or respond to I have to stay out and have to do drugs, or respond to whatever your whatever is. But there's always a resentment there because we're not going to allow it to be our fault until we come to the point where we're at the breaking point and we know there's nothing else we can do. But deep that there's a seated thing there that says, and sometimes it's someone else's fault. It was not your fault, but it's always your responsibility. Stockholm syndrome, for example, when a child or a person is taken away from everything that they know, from their protectors, from their net of safety, and they hold out, they rebel, or they break down, and the brain is trying to keep you alive to survive because that's what it has to do. It has to keep us here. That's its function. It only knows life. Life always chooses life. And when these things are happening, then the brain says, okay, we gotta adapt. And now the child eventually has to adhere and navigate into the wishes and the whim of the captor in order to survive. And there's resentment because the person I love that I depend upon is not here. The resentment to the captor that we learn in our own twisted way to love, even if there's abuse involved. And then we entangle that. What does love really mean? Is tied now to the abuse. Yeah, yeah. That's why we have so many patterns in relationships that we tend to repeat because we're kind of locked in, we're dialed in. And this is on a subconscious level. Remember, 80% of your life is driven by your subconscious mind through habits, through triggers, behaviors, rituals. Okay. And only 15% is conscious, but the 5% is the imagination. That's what saves the day. Or the imagination takes you the other way, that perhaps the world would be better if you're not here. But one thing I want you to understand that it always gets better. It can get better based upon how you perceive it. There can be a better day. And the worst that can happen, for some reason, we're no longer here. But there will come a day when all of us will have to face that truth that none of us are going to be here forever. But no matter what the circumstance, we can choose to be happy. Choose to become inner directed versus outer directed. Choose to learn to manage and navigate and work on and work towards how do we control the things that we can control? Our perception of what is happening to us in the one life that we have. That no one can take your joy. Even if you can love a person and love them across the street, but you cannot take that from me. We decide not to like people. We decide to love people. We decide who we want to spend time with. We decide who we don't want to spend time with. But we can choose to decide just to love people, but don't confuse loving people with being in love with people. Because when you're in love, well, that's when you mess your credit score up. That's when the wrong person uses your car or they have keys to your home. And there is a difference because the operative word of love and forgiveness brings on gratitude, which gives you peace, what brings upon the clarity you need to see the brighter day, to be there. So I want you to write down a list of every person you may have a resentment towards. It could be a sibling because you felt like they got too much attention and you didn't get any. It could be a parent. Sometimes as a child, parents get divorced and you think it's your fault, but you know that this person is not here for you. And there's a resentment. It doesn't mean the absence of love all the time. It means there's something there, someone else's fault. And I want you to write down the names of everyone that you ever feel like you have a resentment towards. Start with a list of 5. And when you list the five individuals, I'd like you to write out the story. What happened to bring this on? Go back. and write out the story of what happened. What happened? Face it. Get clarity with it. What happened? And once you write out what happens, the next phase is, how did it make you feel? When was there a feeling of a absence of love, a loss of control, a loss of purpose or significance? And that's the space where you spin. I want you to become aware of that, because in the next video, we're going to talk about how do we come out of it? How do we rewrite the story? How do we reframe the story? So when those emotions come up, we trigger them and anchor them to something different that doesn't take you to a place that you become part of the issue, part of the problem, part of your own destruction, but that becomes your power place. It becomes a part of the solution, not just for you, but for everyone else that occupies your space. There's something special in you, and I've seen so many people and myself as well. We go through things in life, and when things go wrong, we don't go wrong with it. I can't say that enough. But I do want you to know that perhaps one day you can find meaning if you start to share your story. When you're feeling like you're all alone and you share that story, you realize there were other people just like you, and other people that are thankful that you shared their story because they felt like they were alone too. And now you and that plus one, now there's two. And they may share their story, and you're still sharing your story, and two turns to five, and five turns to 25. And it exponentially grows. And then you find freedom and power that you can live again because there's people just like you. Life is interesting, guys. You know, Paul said in the Bible, the things that I want are not what I do. I do the things in which I hate. Why? Because we're not conscious. We don't have clarity. We don't have peace, gratitude, tranquility, which gives us the peace and the clarity to be able to see things coming a mile away, and not just see with your eyes, see with your very spirit. Have you ever been in a situation you could feel like something good was going to happen, and the opposite, like something terrible was going to happen? And there was response in your body, but it all came from the thoughts that you hold. So we're going to talk about how do you reframe those thoughts, and how I personally was able to dig myself out of a dark hole and find power by helping other people. Because remember, you keep what you have and you give it away. This concludes Volume 3. Unpack your bags. Let's go.